But with that said, leave the room, re-enter as you need to. Okay. Well, here we are. And just really quick introductions. If you all haven't heard my voice before or seen me, I'm Alex Contreras, one of the hosts here. And, by day, I work in the healthcare world and really do enjoy the opportunity to work with the filmmakers and screenwriters in our community, which has nicely grown over the years. And I've been certainly part of the process for 2021 with establishing our program. Craig, just a few words, and we'll hand it to Rebecca.
Yeah, absolutely. So, for those who don't know me, I am a local independent filmmaker. I've been involved in the Madison area industry for about a decade now, working with a number of different film companies in a number of different roles, but primarily as a screenwriter and story developer. By trade, I am in engineering, which is what my education was in as well. So that's why I would call myself a quote unquote professional screenwriter. Definitely no formal education, but I've been very passionate about the art and of storytelling and developing a script. And I've worked on some really great films over the last 10 years, and just kind of excited to be here to share what I have to offer. Rebecca, why don't you say hi?
Hi, everybody, and thank you for joining us this evening. Thank you to Alex and Craig for inviting me. Like Alex, my day job involves healthcare and has for almost 20 years. I've been writing, I got my first Brother typewriter when I was 9 years old. But I've been a townie. I've lived in Madison for 40 plus years. I served as the past vice president of the Wisconsin Screenwriters Forum. I've taught workshops for UW-Madison Writers Institute. I enjoy screenwriting very much. I made the transition to screenwriting from prose writing in about 2009, and I've been building a pretty big portfolio since then.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Rebecca. It's awesome to have you here. Anything else you wanted to mention, Alex, before we get into it?
Nothing to add.
All right, sounds good. So if you haven't been following the previous two sessions, as I mentioned before, we are talking about the development of a script from beginning, middle to end. Our first session was about coming up with ideas and getting a rough draft down on paper. The second session was about taking that rough draft and polishing it and refining it into a final draft. And today's session is going to talk more about what to do with that final draft that you have, how to get it out there, and what the process is going to be like from when you first hook up with a production company to when the cameras finally start to roll and production takes place. So the first areas we're going to talk about is finding a home for your script. Like what you can do to get your final draft out there into the world and to get it made into a movie, all the way from doing it yourself to searching nationwide and things like that. There's always local competitions and things that you can look into. And we will get into networking later in our webinar series, so we'll touch on that briefly, but probably won't take up a whole lot of time with it today. Now, one thing that I find fascinating, I'm going to switch back to AV mode here so we can see our faces, is when I finished some of my very first scripts that I was working on when I first started in the industry, I found it difficult to get it out there at all. Like I didn't know where to start or where to begin. In fact, I think it was Craigslist actually that hooked me up with my very first filmmaking group, but there's tons of other outlets, and the indie filmmaker group actually itself can be a very good opportunity for networking when you're trying to find a home for your script. But for me personally, I was motivated to film it myself, just by myself with a camcorder and I mean literally by myself, not a single other person involved from beginning to end. Not only did that help me add to my YouTube channel, which check it out if you want a healthy dose of cringe, but it also helped me gain a lot of perspective on my style of writing, being able to act it out myself and actually see it on screen and cut it around in editing software. I think it helped me gain a little bit of perspective before I started, sending things out into the wild blue yonder. And it really helps you to gain those skills necessary down the road if you ever do plan on being on set in the future. But when we're talking about writing, the main goal obviously is to work with a production team. Now, I know one of my scripts was picked up due to a screenwriting competition. And I know that can be a really good way to get your name out there and to just see if you have what it takes. I know I definitely had one script, and I believe, Rebecca, you also had one at least one, right, that has won a screenwriting competition, correct?
Yeah. Locally, yeah.
Yes. And what was your experience working with that team after your script was announced as the winner? Like, did you find it an overall pleasant experience?
Oh, definitely. I was thrilled to have my screenplay, my short, picked up and developed and produced here in Madison. But to just back up a little bit, so competitions, there are so many competitions out there, and how do you know the ones that are reputable, and how do you know the ones that you're going to get feedback, and how much should I spend? Well, I think of it this way: any writer should have a marketing budget, okay? In order for you to get your screenplays out into the world, you're going to need to spend a little bit of money, at least to register your scripts, and then a little bit of money to get them into competitions. So when you've got that polished script that you've had other people give you input on, and it's not just the second draft, this is like the 6th or 10th draft, and it's ready to go to a competition. The big reputable competitions are Big Break, Final Draft Big Break, the Page competition, the Nickel competition, Austin Film Festival. So those are the reputable ones. Now, Austin does give you one sheet of free feedback, okay? And then the Nashville Film Festival also gives you free feedback. So if you're looking for the feedback, check out the competitions, find out, some of them charge for feedback, up to $100 sometimes, but it might be worth it for you to get that feedback. And you're killing two birds in one stone by having a series of judges read your script, and then you'll get that feedback, and then maybe, you might win. As far as trying to find a home for your script, if you're not connected to a director or producer, you need to find a way to get connected. For myself, I have 2 resources that I use, and both of them are free. It's Roadmap Writers and Stage32.com. And you can create a free account on either one of those websites, and you put a little bio about yourself, and then you start looking at what they offer. And you can pitch live like this, or you can submit a 2-page written pitch. And please, please, please don't pitch something that's not written. If you pitch something that's not written, and let's say the producer emails you back that same day after you pitch it, hey, that's fabulous, send me the script, and you don't have that script, that looks bad, guys. Don't do that. So only pitch something that you've got, that's polished, that's ready to go. So I've been on both of those resources for a couple of years now. I've had some significant hits off of Stage 32 and off of Roadmap Writers. They also promote reputable contests through those 2 websites as well. They want to help you launch your career. So getting back to Craig's point about what was it like to, have a script get picked up by a producer. So it's a thrill, first of all, right? That's like the ultimate dream, right? Somebody's got my pages and now they want to put it to screen. Yay me. So yay everyone. So then, that's just the first step of many in the process to make it come to fruition, to make it come to the screen. So that's what we're going to kind of talk about today is like, what are the next steps? Because if someone says, yay, we love your script, we're going to produce it, they don't just take that exact same script that one, and then off they go with a camera. There's quite a few steps that happen in between.
Yeah, so over time, as you engage with potential competitions, festivals, etc., and as Craig said, we'll have a session kind of devoted to networking and those experiences, but really good examples, Rebecca, that you're offering here. Those initial connections can lead to more and really starts to expand the network that's essential when you have a particular idea. Maybe it's a genre horror that only a subset of your list is really going to be interested in. And so you really start to cater to those opportunities and those specific connections. And I think that's what folks really get stuck in when they're writing is they'll only write for one genre because that's the only connections they have. But they're a horror writer. What are you doing writing drama? I mean, you just got to make the right connections. And to do that, you just start talking with the people that you're already interacting with to get you repointed. And you can do that in festivals, in competitions, etc. And it's a time-consuming process if you choose to travel that path alone. And I'm sure you did that many years ago. But
and if you work well with one producer and you establish an awesome, honest human-to-human relationship with that producer, let's say it's a producer for a comedy script that you guys are working on. Mm-hmm. Well, you can bet that producer is also connected to a horror producer, right? Mm-hmm. And so they might say, hey, I had an awesome experience working with Craig. He happened to tell me over lunch that he's also got a horror script. Would you care to take a look at it? And there's your in.
Yes.
It's all about creating these relationships because people are interconnected in this industry. They totally are.
Absolutely. Kind of like that 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon thing. Like you start working really well with one group and that leads you to connect with one person from another group. Then a different person in that group leads you to another and so on and so forth. And really, yeah, what's important is just, I think personally, is establishing that really good positive connection, at least with one group of people. So you can have at least, several references at the very least saying, I worked with these people. They can tell you how awesome I am, how, amenable I am to and open to ideas, just to have that group that you can say, yep, this is my go-to team. And, they've got my back if I ever want to do anything else,
And this is probably a good transition to one of your bullets, safety first. So you're exposing yourself to all these different individuals, groups, etc. And so what do you do, Rebecca, when you're engaging with a potential producer or production group when they're interested in something you've written?
So if I get a hit on one of my log lines or on one of my pitches and a producer or director or actor reaches out to me and says, I want to read your script, 99% of the time, the person emails me with a submission release form. And if they are represented by a studio, they're going to send you a submission release form. That means that they are not liable after they read your script, that if 2 years from now, 70% of something that you sent them ends up on the screen with a different title and a different writer, you can't sue them. Okay? That's just how the business works. You never send your script with an attached NDA and ask them to send the NDA. That's not how you play this game. It's amateurish and it'll turn them off. They automatically assume that you have already copyrighted this material somewhere, either with the U.S. Copyright Office or the Canadian Copyright Office or WGA, wherever. So never send your script with an NDA attached to it. they're
Yeah,
going to send you a submission release form.
Yeah, it seems a little counterintuitive when you first think about it, saying, "Oh, I'm the one, giving my script out to who knows whoever, so they should be the ones to say, okay, we promise not to use your script without your permission." But really, it's kind of the other way around. They're trying to protect themselves, from anything they might make in the future being close to your script. So it's just about everyone just making sure that they are protected in every way that is possible. And as writers, you definitely, we should do that, as you said, like with the Copyright Office or the WGA, whatever avenue you want to take to protect your writing, you should definitely do that and make sure that you're giving it to reputable people, as you said.
Yeah.
Sure. It could be a red flag, they send an email to 200 of their best friends, with your screenplay as an attachment. Not that anyone has done that.
Oh, no.
Or seen it. But yeah, I think what Rebecca said, and Craig certainly, that's something to be aware of as far as what's standard protocol.
Yeah.
Right. And then, of course, the big ball of wax is once you find that special team, that special production team that's going to handle your script, what exactly happens next? Like, as you mentioned before, Rebecca, that whatever script you go out there with, there's a very, very small chance that is the exact script that's going to be used when they're filming the actual product. So we can talk about some of those things that are going to happen when you sign with a production company or you start working with a certain team. Different people are going to have their own input on your story and how it could potentially change to fit their ideals, I guess I'll say. I mean, the producers are obviously the ones putting up the money to film any project. So they generally, have input over kind of big picture ideas and what direction the film is going to take. Obviously, the director who signs on has the majority, if not all, of the creative control over any film that your script might be attached to. And a lot of times, other writers will get involved and just other creative input on a team that will cause, revisions that need to be made. I know that I've had overall relatively good experiences working with production teams that have signed on to do my script. But it's also varied too. Like first of all, I had the opportunity to direct one of my own scripts once, which was a fantastic opportunity. But even then, when I was the director of my own script, it still kind of had to change because we knew we only had kind of the budget to do a certain length of script. We knew we only had these X, Y, and Z shooting locations attached to it. And so we kind of had to, cut down the script a little bit for time and streamline it a little more. And so even the script that I set out with wasn't the final script that we ended up writing, or using for the shoot, even though I was the director.
So part of this process is about level setting expectations. And I'm sure Rebecca's got a number of stories about this where after hearing that what she had written is now going to be filmed, in the beginning, you might have that thought, well, maybe they will have me on set and I'll have the opportunity to provide feedback. But that might not be the reality most of the time. I'm sure you have a couple of experience to kind of share from that perspective, Rebecca.
Sure. So it is a rarity to be a screenwriter and have your script picked up by a producer and a director, and then to be later invited to be on the production set. That is a rarity. I consider it a Willy Wonka golden ticket. If you get that invitation to be on set, that is like a golden ticket. But to reiterate, how do we get the input from all these different parties? So in my experience, the really great, crucial input comes from the table read ahead of the actual shoot. So the director will bring the cast together. They'll have the script in front of them. They'll do a table read and maybe a reread. And then afterwards, the director might give you notes right then and there. If the producer's in the room, you might get the producer's notes then and there. And then each one of the actors might even give you notes as well. And I've had the circumstance where I've had one of the actors turn to me and say, I don't believe somebody would actually say this. And then I would have to give them the circumstance of where I wrote that from. So whether it was something that I actually lived or experienced, that I'd have to explain to them, yeah, somebody actually did say that. And then I kind of help set the tone. And then it's up to the director whether he's going to keep that line or not. I gave my feedback. They gave me feedback. It's a give and take situation here, but the director has the final say.
That's true. Like, you have to really keep that in mind as a writer. You talk about having like tough skin or whatever, but really if you're looking to shop your script to a filmmaking company, you have to understand that it is going to be a film. And if a certain director is attached to that project, then yes, it's your story, but it's their film. And it's kind of hard to reconcile with that sometimes, because, all the characters and the dialogue all came from you, and you kind of feel like it's your baby or your project or whatever. But, unless you are going to direct your own writing, really it's, the director's film and they get final say. So odds are something's going to change about your story. Maybe it's only a few words of dialogue here and there. Maybe they really love your story as is. That could happen, but more often than not, you'll need to compromise here and there. And just the important thing is to just be open to collaboration. You don't want to sell out by completely, turning your story into something that isn't meaningful to you anymore. But if you're not willing to collaborate a little bit with directors and producers, you're probably going to have a hard time, finding a team that you can work with, I think.
Rebecca, do you feel like there's a difference between a producer and director's input on a script? I mean, I would assume that they're aligned.
Right. They are aligned, but the director is the one with the vision, right? Mm-hmm. He has got your script playing in his head, and this is how he wants it to flow. And this is how he's going to see it through the camera lens. The producer is kind of the guy behind the camera as well, but he is looking at the entire big picture. He is going from minute by minute to, okay, where's the next shot going to take place? How is, the crew going to get there? What time do they need to be there? How much daylight do we have left? Are we on budget? Did everybody eat before we came? All of that is the producer, right? And so the producer might tap the director on the shoulder and say, you know what, I'm looking at the call sheet, the shots for tomorrow, and I don't think we can do it. I don't think we can shoot in that cafe tomorrow because somebody told me that there's a protest going on in that cafe tomorrow, and man, we're going to have to improvise. Okay, so now what? So now you, the writer, if you're on set, will be tapped by saying, okay, you wrote this in a cafe. Can you write it in somebody's kitchen instead? We're going to have to shoot this at my aunt's house, last minute notice, restructure this. So if you're on set, boom, that's your assignment. You don't squabble about it. It's out of your control. It's out of everyone's control. So now you just need to go rewrite it and bring it back by whatever your deadline is. So, and that's if you're a writer on set. If you're not a writer on set, they might have a different writer on set that rewrites it, or they might correspond with you and say, hey, this thing came up out of the blue. Could you crank out a couple of extra pages? Or, this is what the situation is. So that does happen. Do you find that co-writing
can originate more often than not in that type of instance, in that scenario. I suspect that, it can also be deliberate, saying you're working with this other writer.
Right.
But go ahead.
Right. So the director, before you even go to shooting, it started with your script, okay? And then somewhere along the line, the director brings on his buddy who's also a writer. And so, before shooting, he might tell you, I'm bringing on Ed. Ed's got some great ideas for some action. I love your dialogue, so we're going to stick with your dialogue, but I might have Ed finesse some of the action. And that's his deal. Okay? So there might be some tweaks that Ed makes along the way that show up on the shooting script, and that's the deal the director made. And you don't really dispute that. That's something that the director is managing.
Craig, have you found your experiences to be similar?
More or less, kind of all across the board, actually. Like, I've definitely worked on projects where we kind of started with more of a concept, and the producer encouraged me to work with an outside writer as a collaboration, really before the script was even written. Like, we had started with this general log line, a concept for a film, and the producer thought it'd be a good idea to work together even both before the script was written. But also, I've had the experience of like working with a team beforehand. Like, on one project, I submitted the script and they really liked it, but they had some notes and comments on it. So I went back and rewrote it, and they liked it even more, but it got even longer with the second revision, and they wanted it to get shorter. So that was my own fault. But then we, they collaborated with a few other writers, sort of, not with, like, separately from me, and sort of reworked the script into what eventually became the shooting script. So it was kind of where they took, what I had given them and sort of reworked it themselves to then what was used in production. So there's a lot of different times and places that co-writing and collaboration can take place, anywhere from pre-production to, before the script is even written, to before production has begun and during production as well. You have to be kind of ready for that collaboration wherever it might come up.
And I know there may be some folks that have already had the opportunity to participate in Madison 48's film competition. That, I think, is a perfect situation where you are, in fact, co-writing with your peers, potentially in a room or virtually like this, where you're having a conversation about a genre, a concept, and then you build out a story, potentially in an hour or two, and then a far smaller group is actually able to hammer out something. And if I recall, Rebecca, you haven't had quite the opportunity to do that, or have you?
I haven't participated in the Madison 48 yet, but I want to.
But now you do.
Yes. Yes.
And I know Craig certainly has over the years. I think the opportunity for co-writing is just more natural in that setting, because you're all working under similar duress and goals, et cetera, and trying to be as efficient as possible. There's been a fair number of people have said that, just if it's a natural thing, then go with it. And certainly there are other circumstances, as you guys have described, where it's just the situation. If I'm going to be part of that process, I have no choice. I'm the co-writer.
Right. Yeah. And talking about the 48-hour festival too, like that is definitely a great place to practice collaboration. Like if you're not used to it, if you're used to kind of being a lone wolf or whatever, that is a great opportunity to sit down. Because at least with the teams that I've worked with, that initial like brainstorming session of coming up with ideas for your film definitely is sort of a group activity, kind of, because when you're working with a group, usually the 48-hour groups are relatively small. It feels like you're all making it together. You know, it's a group effort and you're banding together. Every production is kind of like that, but when you've truncated your timetable to that short of a time period, it becomes, you know, time is a factor and everyone gets involved. So that definitely is a good place to practice your collaboration skills.
So my last question for Rebecca on this slide here was to get a little bit deeper into the draft process. And, you know, I'd love to hear how that may vary when you're working with a co-writer versus going solo on a project. I assume it would be very different on that process. I don't know if you have any thoughts, Rebecca, or...
So with my indie film experience, my co-writer, I guess, was my director.
Okay.
So, you know, I would get notes back from the director. I would implement those notes. He would look at that next draft. Same thing as Craig, where we started with like, you know, an 11-page script, and the next thing you know, it inflated to 17 pages based on notes.
Yeah.
You find out, okay, festivals don't like anything more than 15 minutes long. So now you got to hack it up again. So it's a back and forth and back and forth. And as long as everybody involved with the project understands that quality doesn't come in 5 minutes, quality takes time. And so, you know, before you even get to the shooting script, this is all development, right? It starts with either an idea and you flourish it into a script, or it started with a script that won a contest. And so the collaboration starts with the director. What is his vision of what you wrote? And what would he like to see you edit, change, add, delete, that kind of thing? Or what would he like to see you amp up? So I'm a comedy writer, so I get notes about, you know, amp up the comedy or tone it down a little bit, or you gave this line to the guy, but could you give it to the girl instead? I think it'd be funnier if she said it. So that kind of stuff.
Right.
As far as what I have learned about collaboration, this is in the TV world, not so much in the film world, but if you are interested in being a TV writer, the way that works is you're in the TV writer's room, and you are one of 3 or one of 13 writers for that show. Modern Family had 13 writers for that show in the writer's room. So that's a lot of people bouncing collaboration ideas off of each other, right? So if that's your passion, if TV is what you want to do, then get used to working in a room with a bunch of people that are throwing ideas out, and get used to accepting other people's ideas, and definitely get used to accept criticism. So yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have to kind of have a tough skin at some point to say, okay, I know that this is areas where, you know, maybe my script is a little weaker. Let's work on that, and let's try to get to the final product that everyone is comfortable with. And most importantly, though, the director, because they are, you know, the creative control of the project.
Now, Craig, you had a last slide here, if I recall.
Yeah, yep. Let's pop open. So really the only things left to share is kind of like what it's like, what things can change on set and in the moment. So, you know, we kind of mentioned these things that can happen before shooting starts, but, you know, after shooting starts, there's definitely things that can also happen where a script could need to be altered. Things include casting is a big thing, like depending on what actors or actresses that the director envisions for the characters that you create, different people bring different things to the table. Feasibility is another really big thing. Like I've always tried to, when I'm writing, I always think independent filming. Like, so I only think about locations that would be available to an independent film writer, in the Madison area. But if you write something that's, outside of the realm of possibility, then things might need to be changed to make it feasible. Talking about improvisation too, shot lists are never concrete, and they can change on set at a moment's notice. And we all know that things change once the creative juices start flowing. And obviously the editing process too, even in post-production, even if you use for the shooting script the exact same script that you brought to the company, it could still be different. The way that they cut it and edit it around after the fact, things can change. So I think the biggest one that affects scripts is improvisation, especially if it's an independent shoot and maybe you have taken the time to kind of plan out the shoot shot for shot, location for location. As soon as you get there in the moment, something maybe happens. Maybe you can't get the angle that you need. Maybe, the location you were going to shoot at, like you mentioned, is unavailable the day that you're going to shoot in it, and you have to think quickly. And improvisation is a really important, tool that a writer needs to have in addition to a production team, because they're going to find any way to solve the problem that they can, whether it's bringing in a different character into the scene that wasn't in there originally, or going to a different location than was originally in the script.
I'm really hoping that producer had the opportunity to bring on a writer. I'm just saying, because this is assuming that the writer's there, able to bounce off an idea. I mean, so if Rebecca wrote a script for me, I'm producing, we're filming right now, and if you're not there, I'm going to give you a call. I'm going to say, we're having to make a swap here, or maybe this is just not working as I intended. I know we did some read-throughs earlier, and we've been rehearsing, and now with the setting all the pieces together, it's just not how I intended. I think that's a great opportunity. I hope the producer does that, but might not always be the case.
Yeah, you would hope that you find a team to work with that would value your creative input enough to reach out to you and contact you, and at the very least say, "Hey, this is a problem we ran into. What can we do to fix it?" We want you to be involved in that. And if that does happen and they don't contact you, I don't know. Depending on how big of a change it is, I maybe wouldn't take that too seriously. Maybe time was a factor and they really needed a solution that second. Because if anyone who's been on set for a film knows, time is one of the biggest commodities and factors in any film shoot. You only have so much time to film in a day. And unless you have the money to pay your entire crew full-time wages for an entire week, your options are rather limited. So things need to change. Yeah. So if you do find yourself lucky enough to be on set for your own work, which I myself have been, there have been a couple films where I wasn't on set, but for the majority, actually, I have been able to be on set for witnessing the filming of my own writing. I know that Rebecca, you've mentioned before that if you find yourself on set specifically in the role of on-set consultant as a writer, that there really is a certain etiquette that you should follow and sort of rules to observe so that you don't overstep your boundaries, and just to make sure that you are providing the what the production needs exactly. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. Again, it's an extreme privilege for a writer to be invited on set, and you should treat it as such. When I was trying to figure out how to, explain this for this webinar tonight, I picture it like a courtroom. Okay. There are certain etiquettes that you follow when you're in a courtroom, a court of law. The judge think of him as like your director. He speaks and everybody listens. your job as a writer is that you're not the defendant and you're not on trial here. Your story is, so to speak. It's your story that's playing out, and the cast and the crew, they're the jury, and they're in it to hear the whole story. And so when you're on set and you're sitting in one of those director chairs and you've got the headset on and you're watching your words and unfold in front of you, just be a part of the moment. Soak it up. Observe everything. And really, when they say quiet on the set, that means quiet on the set, and that includes you. You can't blurt out any kind of, advice you have to anybody. You got to treat it like it's the real thing, because it is. So there have been instances that I have heard from writers who are, super giddy or super excited or super anxious, and they can't hold it together. And you got to hold it together. There will be breaks between cuts where you can have a chat. But again, you have to trust your director, and this is the director's vision. And if you have a note or a comment for the director, do it after the shoot, because the clock is ticking. Please don't waste the director's time during the shoot. If it's something crucial, put it down and then send them an email later that night or something. But, and be flexible, because they might turn to you, right? They might turn to you and say, okay, we think that we want to shoot it this way with this actor saying it in this tone. What do you think of that? And then go ahead and tell them what you think of that. If they ask you. If they don't ask you, then save your comments for later. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity, and think of it like that. And again, you are building relationships with these folks. If you want to be picked up later on for something that you wrote, they'll remember you, and they'll remember how you acted and your behavior on set. If you were a joy to work with, you bet they're going to circle back with you and ask you to work with them again. But if you were defensive and had comments all the time, good, bad, otherwise, they'll remember that too. So my big takeaway is have gratitude and have fun, because it really is a privilege to be on set.
Yeah, and I absolutely 100% agree with everything that you were saying there. Sorry, hang on a second. There we go. My biggest thing was when I'm on set, just like you said, be polite and be professional. Just carry yourself in a way that you would expect, from anyone else on a film set. But and one thing I wanted to mention too, you talked about, interacting with the director on set and everything, and you're absolutely right. Like, it's their job to direct the film. You can't be bothering them with everything, but there can, like we mentioned before, there's improvisation, things change. And if something, does change that you really strongly feel like maybe they need to sort of take something in a certain direction, I mean, I would stand up for yourself. I'll tell one little story. I was on set for one of my films, and this was one that was co-written after the fact. And one of the changes that the director suggested was tweaking the ending a little bit to make it, kind of different than I had originally intended. And I was okay with that. But when we got on set and I kind of saw how, the characters were going and how the story was going, we were just about ready to shoot that final scene for the end of the story. And before we started, I pulled the director aside and I kind of gave one last pitch. I'm like, I think that, it really would be better maybe if we, kind of tried to shoot my original ending. I kind of gave one last shot to kind of pitch my true story. And he said, you know what, let's do it. Let's shoot both. We're going to shoot both endings because it'll be the same camera angles and we'll see how it turns out. And they did. They shot both. They actually shot both plus one additional ending. And they ended up using my original ending in the final cut. Like that was something where just the fact that I kind of put one last word in there before we started shooting that, once he saw it in front of him, he's like, you know what, like, you're right. Like, that actually played a lot better than what we had originally planned on doing. So yes, you don't want to stick your nose in where it doesn't belong. You don't want to hound them on every single detail if you're on set. But if you see something that you just really feel strongly about, I think, people can respect you a lot more if you're willing to kind of stand up for your own idea and really just, give that pitch. But again, as long as you do it in a polite and professional manner.
So it's about picking your battles potentially versus writing a list. I wrote 100 pages of notes while you were filming this. I'd like to now review it with you versus just 2 thoughts I'd like you to consider based on what I've seen.
That's a great way of putting it. Picking your battles, because like we said, things are going to change. It's pretty much a guarantee. You're going to have to compromise and collaborate on something. The question is when to make a big deal out of it,
One last takeaway is, as writers, I don't know myself, but we're always so insecure about what we wrote. This sucks. Oh my God, what am I doing with this? Hey guys, somebody picked it up. Somebody's going to make it into a movie. They are there on set because of what you wrote. This is their ode to you. So always remember that too, that you earned this. Somebody thought you were worthy of this. This story means something. This story struck a chord with this director, this producer. They're doing this because of you. And every single person that showed up on that set is because of what you wrote. So always remember that. Always put that in your heart when you're getting all these other, feedback notes back, switch this, change this. At the heart of this, at the end of the day, it's because of something you created. Always remember that.
I really like that. Someone told me that same exact thing with my very first project. I was about to go present in front of a theater of several hundred folks that were participants, cast, crew, families that were connected to the feature film that I was working on. I didn't believe him at all. Not a single bit. I said, he's just trying to make me feel better, so I'll go up there and talk. But it's true. So, there, without a good story, there wouldn't be a project.
And the best compliment I ever got at the end of a shoot was when I had one of the crew turn to me and say, "Hey, when are you going to write the sequel?"
That's so great. That makes me want to share one of mine too, actually. One of the actors who had the privilege of acting in one of our stories earlier, I worked with that same actor on a different film a couple of years later, but I was acting, I think, as assistant director on that film. I had not written that film, but I was on set, and the actor came up to me and he said, "Oh, so is this another Craig Olsen story that we're doing today?" And I'm like, "No, I'm helping out as AD, but I didn't write this one." And as soon as I said that, he's like, "Oh, I'm out. All right, I'm out of here." He had enjoyed working on my story so much that he just was, jokingly disappointed that it wasn't another one of mine. And it's those interactions that you get with the casting crew and stuff on set that really make it worthwhile. So, as a writer, if you do ever have the opportunity to be on set, definitely take it. Like, it's a magical experience. It really is.
Well, I wanted to leave a few minutes for folks if they did have any questions for Rebecca, Craig, etc. I've been watching the queue, a couple of conversations about the film competitions, specifically the ones that Rebecca had participated in. I did reshare some of that information. Hopefully that got out okay. Looks like the chat might have got a little jumbled here. Not sure how that happened, but we'll keep our eyes on it here if there are other things that are coming through. Okay, here's one that came in by Carla. Can you tell us about your current projects? What do you have on the docket for 2021? Well, maybe they started in 2020 or even further back.
And that was directed at Rebecca, if you didn't say that. Yeah.
Oh, me? Okay. So because of the relationships that I made through Madison Indie Filmmakers, I had a short, I call it a quirky cosmic comedy short, produced, and it's now out on the festival circuit, so we're hoping that it gets accepted. So we're pretty excited about that. And I was also a producer of that short. That was my third short that I've actually been a producer on, as well as being a writer, and I love having both of those experiences. And I took last year during the pandemic to really create some new material. Again, I kind of write on the lighter side. I try to find humor. I guess my brand is it's female character driven from a family that's gone awry, but she tries to do good in this world. That's my brand. So I currently have 4 half-hour family comedy pilots that I'm circulating right now. So I've got one in development with a producer. It's kind of exciting. It's autobiographical, about my own family. It takes place in the 80s. I don't know if anybody watches Young Rock on NBC, but a lot of those throwback comedies are kind of big right now. So yeah. I have a feature script, and guys, this is part of the, being a screenwriter is not a sprint, it's a marathon. I have a script that's done well in competitions, but this script, honestly, 2013, I think is when I wrote it. And it's been revised umpteen times, and I've had a handful of producers request it, so that's in circulation being read right now. And another tip for you guys, so keep a spreadsheet of everywhere that your script gets requested. So if you get a hit or a bite from somebody that says, send me your script, put it on the spreadsheet. Who is the person? What's their email address? What studio are they associated with? When did you send it? And what did you send? And then that's your way of trailing your material. So you can go back to them 3 weeks later, 4 weeks later. Hey, I sent you my script on such and such a date. Have you had a chance to read it? And by the way, everybody's reading, and they've always been reading, but right now they're inundated with stuff because the industry is opening back up again after the pandemic. So people are flooded right now. So it might take 4 weeks to hear back. It might take 6 months before you hear back. Again, it's a marathon, people.
Yeah, definitely. You said bookkeeping is important, and doing your research too. Like we talked about where to send your stuff, like definitely keep track of who you send stuff to, but also, do some research before you send it so that you know who you're sending it to, and so that you don't send it to the same place twice in a row or whatever. Like it never hurts to be really diligent about bookkeeping and doing your research. Like that's definitely a good point. I'm glad you brought that up.
Well, we're at the top of the hour here, and really do appreciate you, Rebecca, for joining us for this session. It was wonderful to have you, your input, your advice, your experience. I hope that engagement with folks it gives people some additional opportunities when they're looking at this topic and more. And Craig, as always, appreciated for you getting us geared up for screenwriting and story development. With that, I know Kelly Leiter is going to be taking on our next 3 sessions talking about production. So I'm excited to have her for us to transition. It is a natural transition from this topic to get in kind of the guts of what it takes to actually see one of these projects in production. So with that, I think this is a good parting point. I will ask for Rebecca and Craig, George, to stay on the line here. And we'll just talk just a really quick wrap up. But again, thank you all for joining tonight.
Yes. Thank you all so much.